This week's video is sponsored by Squarespace.
Wow, hello everybody. I hope you're all doing great. Thank you for joining me on another vlog. You may have noticed that the last few weeks I haven't been putting up regular videos, and probably the main reason is that I have a bit of a special project going on right now that I'll tell you about perhaps in a month or two. I'm really excited about it, and so I've been working on that. As far as photography goes, I've been doing a lot of photography. The spring, as I've mentioned before, on Vancouver Island has been excellent this year. And of course now we're halfway into summer, and the spring greens are still looking really good. So I've decided to come back to an area that I visited probably about 2 years ago now. It's just up island a little bit, and there's a nice little waterfall here. It's a little tricky to get to. It's not that far, but it is tricky to get to. And there is still quite a bit of water running, so that's a really good thing. The only problem is I've noticed that there's some deadfall in the middle of the river here, so I'm going to have to try and clean that up a bit if I can. And also, this time I brought my hip waders. I think last time I just brought welly boots. So yeah, it should be a bit more comfortable standing in the water. Not that it's probably that cold right now. So I'm just going to get my hip waders on and get my camera gear all set up, and we'll head on into the river here and see if we can get some shots of this beautiful little waterfall. I don't know why I always call them hip waders. They're actually chest waders, except these don't go up to my chest. I guess these are just more like hip wader pants, or I don't know, neoprene pants. Now I don't really have proper boots for these, so I'll just use these old barefoot running shoes. They're not the greatest thing, but it's better than walking without any kind of footwear in there. I think the last time I was here, this big log was right across the river here. So I seem to remember having a duck underneath it. So it's just amazing in the winter how much water comes down here. It's just raging. So when the water comes down here, it just pushes everything out of its way. The waterfall's looking really good. It's going to be pretty much a one-shot deal, perhaps a vertical. Might do a horizontal as well. There's some beautiful rocks on the side here with lots of moss. Right, got to find a comfortable spot here. There's nothing like walking into a slippery stream with thousands of dollars worth of equipment. So as I said before, it's a pretty straightforward shot, and it'll probably be more or less the same as what I took last time. I was kind of hoping that there might be a little bit more green or more vibrant green, and in the woodlands there definitely is, but looking this way I think it's more or less the same as last time. So perhaps I can try and think of a different way to photograph this. Personally, I think probably the best angle of view, or the best perspective, is right in the middle of the stream here. If you're on the side there, you can't see the whole waterfall. And ideally, when you're photographing a subject like this, you want to show the whole waterfall. Plus the boulders on the side here, on the right side, they have some wonderful moss on them. Right then, before I press the shutter, there are a number of things that I might want to consider. The first being is, how do you want to render the waterfall? Do you want it to have that silky smooth look, or do you want to capture it with a fast shutter speed and capture all the action? So you have to decide what you want to do first. Now if you can't figure out, well, what looks best, then the best thing to do is to take a number of test shots at different shutter speeds to find out what you're going to need to get that effect that you want. The second thing is depth of field. Do you want everything to be in sharp focus? And if you do, then you're going to have to stop down to, say, perhaps f11, f16. It really depends on what lens you're using. Wider the lens, the less you'll probably have to stop down. The next thing is we have foliage moving around. Do you want to have that sharp in your image, or do you want it to be blurry? If you want it to be sharp, then you're probably going to have to up your ISO, or perhaps do a little bit of focus stacking, or perhaps a little bit of painting layers so that you have different exposures or different shutter speeds, and then you paint in the areas that you want sharp. So there's all these things to consider. From experience, for my liking, I usually use a shutter speed of around 1/5 of a second. Now that's a really general kind of rule, if you want to say a rule. I mean, it's not really a rule, it's just something that I like. Really depends on the waterfall. Sometimes I might go for multiple seconds, and then there's other times when the waterfall might be more powerful that you want a faster shutter speed. So in this case, what I'm probably going to have to do, seeing as I want everything in sharp focus, I'll probably stop down to f16, but that means I'm going to be shooting at pretty slow shutter speeds, which might be okay for the waterfall, but I suspect it'll be too slow. It'll definitely be too slow for the foliage. So I'll probably have to take some images at a faster shutter speed with a higher ISO to capture the action in the leaves and such, and then paint those in with layers in Photoshop later on. So it's really important that you think of all these things that you want to do beforehand and not move your tripod, because once you move it, none of that stuff will line up. So I pretty much have my composition that I want. I'm going to take one general overall image for the rocks and everything, and then I'll start concentrating on the ferns and the shutter speed for the waterfall and so on. And then I'll combine those in Photoshop later on, and I'll show you how to do that. I'm also going to use a Case Wolverine magnetic filter to get rid of the glare and add a bit more contrast to that beautiful moss in the rocks there. And of course, by doing that, you're probably going to lose another 1 to 2 stops. So that's something else that you might want to consider. So there's an awful lot to think about, but if you just take one step at a time, then it's really not that difficult to achieve.
Once again, I'd like to thank Squarespace for supporting my channel and sponsoring this week's video. One of my favorite features of a Squarespace website is the ability to quickly and efficiently update a gallery or page either from a desktop computer or while on the fly using the Squarespace app from my mobile device. Loading multiple images onto a page is quick and offers the ability to change a design or page quickly and elegantly without any coding knowledge. Want to sell your products? No problem. Setting up shop is also quick and intuitive. Sound interesting? Why not head over to squarespace.com and try it for free? And if you like what you find, use the code AdamGibbs for 10% off your first purchase. All right, we're back in the office, and I've opened up a selection of images that kind of represent the images that I took for various things in the scene. This image here, you'll notice that there's a fast shutter speed, ISO 1250, 5.6 at a 30th of a second. And the reason why I took it that shutter speed was to get the ferns on the side here reasonably sharp. I say reasonably because I probably could have used a faster shutter speed. They're still a little bit blurry, but they're better than, say, this exposure here, which was 1.3 of a second. And you'll notice that the water is quite a bit smoother. So this is going to be my base exposure, and I quite like the foreground actually, so I might use that. But you'll notice that most of the foliage in the foreground anyway is a little bit blurry. In the background, not so much. I mean, really, in a real world situation, it doesn't really matter that much unless you're blowing up a big print. Most of you probably wouldn't even notice on a smaller print unless you're pixel peeping. Excuse me. And then finally, we have the exposure that I took for the water. So that's 1/5 of a second, and that was just at f9. So I just focused on the waterfall at the back. But I just noticed that a lot of this foliage is not bad on the side here. I neglected to take an image at a fast shutter speed for this foliage over here. So I might just use this one because I think the faster shutter speed, yeah, I didn't focus on this area here, which was a bit of a mistake on my part. Oh well. So what I've done here is I've more or less tried to match the exposures as close as I can. They might be off just a little bit, but it doesn't matter too much. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab all of these images and right click and then go edit in open as layers in Photoshop. Right, we've opened up the images in Photoshop, and I just realized that I think I more or less did the same thing last time I went to this area. I think I did a time blend, so just count this as perhaps a refresher course. As you can see, we have these in the layers here. The first one is the very long exposure, which we actually want on the bottom. So I'm just going to drag that to the bottom there. This is the exposure for the waterfall. So I'm going to put that in the middle. And then the first exposure is the one for the ferns. So if we just zoom in here, you can see that indeed we do have some sharp-ish ferns. Right, first thing we want to do is just grab all of those layers. So you're selecting all the layers, go over to Edit and Auto Align Layers. And the reason why we do that is just in case there's any kind of movement when you took the photographs. Even though they're more or less the same photograph, there's always the risk of movement, especially when you're standing in the water. The next thing we want to do is put a black mask on that so we're hiding it. So you go down to this little area down here, and let me just turn on me mouse thing here. So just down here, right here, there's the mask. So if you push the Option key or Alt and click on that, that'll create a black mask for you. Go down to the next layer and do the same thing. Alt Option, click on the mask, and now you can see that we have the base layer. And all we have to do is go to the first layer, make sure you click on the mask, And we want to change the paint color to white, which it is. If you want to toggle with the X, that'll change the paint color. See, it's black there and now white. So it's white. Make sure that you press B for brush and make sure your opacity and flow are at 100%. And also make sure that your mouse or your brush is has pretty much zero hardness, so that there's no harsh lines when you blend that in. And all you have to do now is just paint that in. So we're just going to paint that section in, and you can see, like, voila, we now have, if we just zoom in here, sharp ferns. Very easy. Same up here, there's a few ferns up here, so we'll just reduce our paintbrush size. And it's funny, in all honesty, with the camera that I'm using, the GFX 100, at ISO 1200 and ISO 100, there isn't a huge amount of difference. I could probably get away with an image at a higher ISO for the whole thing without doing all this blending stuff. But this is more just for your benefit and to show you, whoops, how to do this. And if you make a mistake, you can just press on X, and that'll go black, and you can just paint that black again. So you're pretty much painting back on the mask. If you go to Option Alt and click on the mask, you can see the mask there. So we want white, and we'll just paint that in there. And it's that easy. And for the water, I actually quite like this slower shutter speed. But this back here, I'm not that keen on. So I'm just going to go to the second layer here. Make sure you're on the mask. B for brush, white. And I'm just going to slowly paint this in. Now, for this one, I might go down a little bit of a lower flow. And I'm just going to paint this in. You can see that the texture is starting to come back into that water. And you can play around with this if you kind of like the kind of dreamy look. Then you can perhaps just put a little bit of texture in there, or whatever. And you could do this with faster shutter speed as well. So as an example, I could go up to this top mask here, and if I started painting that, I would actually be putting in a lot more texture. So if we went up to, say, 100%. You can see that now I'm putting in the texture of the photograph taken at a faster shutter speed. But you have to remember that when I took that photograph, I was at a very shallow depth of field, and I only focused on these ferns here and not the waterfall. So if you were going to do that, make sure that you get a sharp image of the waterfall, or you focus on something in the background there. So we're just going to change the color again. Just paint that to how we had it before, like so. So you can see there's a lot of creative things you can do with this time blending, and I know I've covered it a number of times, and other photographers have covered it also, but it's well worth doing because it doesn't take an awful lot of effort. So we got a white brush, X, and I'm just going to keep painting this in here, like so. And then also, if I wanted to say put a little bit of texture in the foreground here, we could go with B, and I could actually just paint. Oh, that's 100%. We don't want that. Let's go 50 X. We just paint a little bit in there. So there we go. That's all you have to do. It's pretty easy. I don't think I have anything else that I can add other than just take your time. Make sure that you get the exposures that you need in the field. Take your time and just make sure that you align those in Photoshop before you start painting. And yeah, it's a pretty easy technique.
I think I might be a new trendsetter with my neoprene trousers. What do you think? Even though they're really uncomfortable and sweaty. Right, I think that's it for me today. I've been fighting with the light actually. It's trying to clear up. Sun's trying to come out. It's supposed to get hot and sunny all this week. So I think that might be the end of the spring greens and the cooler weather, which is a shame. But you never know, it might continue all the way to the fall. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got something out of it. If you did, please be sure to give me the old thumbs up. Leave a comment, that's always helpful. And if you'd like to help my channel in other ways, be sure to head on over to my website where I have a number of items for sale, including I have a few hats left and my books Antarctica, and I also have a number of copies of Quiet Light left. So go check those out at adamgibbs.com. All right, folks, till next time. Bye-bye.